a curriculum that is preparing students to live international lives? How's the organization evolving as a result?
Yeah, I think we feel very much at the centre of the hurricane sometimes, and we are at the whim of 157 different governments and what they choose to do, because we have two lenses. One is where the student is now, and the other one is where they want to go next. So, very unfortunately, the Russian government placed the IB on a list of companies that effectively meant we were banned from operating in the country, and we had to close our roughly dozen schools with immediate effect, which for students meant that suddenly they had to find either a different curriculum or move country to complete their studies. Now, there might be different views as to whether being on that list is a good thing or a bad thing from your viewpoint on the world. But we're also seeing things here closer to home in the UK, where the UK government has effectively reduced the funding for IB schools in the UK, which probably means that they won't be able to afford to offer it. And a lot of this links to choice. And I think one of the things that's really interesting is, every talk has to have AI mentioned in it, otherwise you're not seen to be in the post. What's interesting for me is that on one breath, we've got, AI is really important, STEM is really important, but actually, when we talk about jobs that can't be replaced, it's in the cultural sectors. And yet, many governments I see devaluing the arts. So in the recent changes in the UK, effectively, the premium is on maths, further maths, science, and not much else. And so I think the thing for us is thinking about as an organisation is, frankly, can the university systems keep up with what we want to do in terms of, developing our education? Because there has been this tendency of each group of education blames the one behind them. So effectively, the secondary schools will blame the primary schools for not preparing the students well, the primary schools blame the nurseries for not preparing the kids well, the universities blame the secondary schools for not preparing them well, and the world of work blames the universities for not preparing them well. So how do we break that chain? And I think one of the challenges we find is that as we're developing and innovating our curriculum, how do you move into that space where effectively, and particularly linking to the countries you mentioned, biology, chemistry and physics are the three sciences. What about computer science? What about environmental science? What about interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary subjects? Where's their place in the world? So as we move into offering subjects in, say, data and society, language and culture, literature and performance, environmental systems and societies, a lot of the growth markets, whilst the private universities in those growth markets have independence, a lot of the public universities, which is where the volume is, don't, and also the lower price courses. So how are we going to encourage those governments to open up and think more broadly about what education is and should be? Because effectively, parents are often quite conservative. Unless they can see a natural pathway, they don't want their kids to be, and I don't with my two, they don't want them to be the guinea pigs, the ones who are trying, the ones who are doing things differently. But all power to those parents who feel safe to do that. So whether it be our systems transformation program that we're working with 4 of our schools to implement a completely different way of looking at subjects, of examining subjects, looking at the ways that we think about competencies as well as skills, as well as knowledge. We're looking to radically change the way that we see education as not just being learning, knowledge and content, but about human and planetary flourishing as being at the cornerstone of what the IB does. But not all universities are ready for that, and not all systems, and where there's a huge amount of government control in the system, that can be really challenging, and it's in a lot of the growth markets that were listed. So I think that's the challenge I would take on behalf of all curriculum providers is we're ready, we want to change, we want to evolve, and I think for markets like the US with holistic admissions, they can adapt really well. But actually for a lot of mainland Europe and also some of the areas of Asia and Southeast Asia, the bureaucracy and governmental control makes that much, much more challenging. Even now, 50 years on with the IB having the core at the core of what we do, in many countries, because there isn't one locally, students don't get a benefit from it, or at least not a tangible utilitarian benefit from it. It certainly benefits them in terms of transition, but it isn't recognised in admission. So my call is on universities around the world effectively to look at how you can adapt to what's coming. New students with new curriculum. We saw in the UK the curriculum and assessment review, and in a great in another publication in Wonky, there was a great article about universities. There are different students coming. You need to prepare for them. So that would be the challenge I would lay out to our colleagues in the higher education sector.